Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Brandy Cool. I'm with Pennsylvania Head Start Association. Today we're going to meet with Michelle and Nicole. Your name totally slipped my mind. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Nicole and Michelle from Elect to learn a little bit more about that program. So if you have any questions, please feel free to come off mute. Share them in the chat. If you could also share your name and your program in the chat as well. We encourage video. It makes for a more engaging conversation. And then again, please come off mute as you have questions or if you want to engage in the conversation. But I will pass it over to you, Nicole.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here today. I do hope that this is helpful and that we can pass this along to others when we are finished. But for now, I just want to quickly introduce myself and then I'll let Michelle introduce herself as well. So my name is Nicole Hartman. I'm with the Center for Schools and Communities in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. And my position as a youth development coordinator for this program is to provide statewide technical assistance, programming, oversight, professional development, you name it. So I'm kind of I'm a support for all of our elect programs in whatever capacity they might need. So I help them prepare for their annual monitorings, and then I also help with any kind of corrective action plans or things to just keep programming moving forward in a positive direction. So that's what I do. I'm going to let Michelle speak quickly, and then we'll get started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Myers, and I am the ELECT Program Coordinator at the Lancaster Lebanon Intermediate Unit 13. So I cover Lancaster and Lebanon counties, working with pregnant and parenting youth within those two counties.
Did it. Now I did it. I muted myself and then I'm like, where's my mute? Okay, so thank you, Michelle, for that introduction. I had the pleasure of meeting Michelle. I guess it's been like a year, almost a year now, right?
Yeah.
In person. And
Mhm.
then we also get to kind of network and communicate at events like our elect program conference, annual conference,
Mhm.
things like that. So even though Michelle is fairly new to the coordinator role,
I
I will
am, yeah.
say that, yeah, you went into a program that was extremely effective, doing very well.
Mhm.
You didn't have too much of a rough transition, I guess, but yeah,
No,
so
it went in the grand scheme of things, it went pretty smooth.
yeah, well, that's
Oh.
good. And I'm glad to hear that too, as well, for my coordinators and all the programs. We definitely appreciate all of the proactive training, intentional purpose behind getting knowledgeable and gaining that expertise on the program itself, but also to support our case managers who do the, kind of boots on the ground work with our students directly day to day. So, well, thank you so
Mhm.
much, Siobhan. So I'm glad that you're all here, and I will get started on kind of a journey through Elect and what we are and what we do. And if you have questions, we're in a very small and intimate group today. So if you have any questions, you can certainly unmute. You can put it in the chat. I will ask Brandy, if you don't mind when you see chat come up. If you don't mind interrupting, that would be great. But yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started. So as you see here on the screen, you're seeing the name of the program, but also some artwork that was given to us from our Midwestern IU participants. This was a mother, father, and a young child who did their own little, artwork with their hands. I just think it's a really great way to like visualize what our ELECT program is all about. And we are a Pennsylvania Department of Education initiative that is funded by the Department of Human Services. So as we go through and talk a little bit about eligibility, you're going to see how that funding is kind of interwoven throughout our programming. So I'll just go ahead and get started so you can see that. All right. So in terms of purpose and goals, if you didn't know this already, the primary purpose of ELECT is to assist our pregnant, which we say expectant now, and I didn't change that on the slide, but expectant, custodial or non-custodial young parents under the age of 25. What that means is they can be served up through their 24th year, but once they turn 25, they would have to be exited. If you're familiar with ELECT in the past, you may realize that this age has gone up from previously 22 to now 25. And so we're really trying to do the best we can to serve as many of our students as we can and our young parents all the way up through they can get their diploma, or HSE, they can get their diploma, whether they're on IEP goals or any other alternative education situation. And, you know, the principal goal of ELECT, I think, is somewhat on the surface self-explanatory, but we do a lot more than I think most people realize when it comes to supporting our young parents. The principal goal is to assist our parents to break the cycle of welfare dependence. And I don't love that word, but I think it's a DHS statement that really does paint a picture of what our goal is ultimately, and that is to make sure that we are creating and developing, empowering young people to be self-sufficient, that they can be able to be productive citizens, that they can go out and really feel good about the work that they're doing, as well as the parenting aspect of things. So we make sure we really try hard to keep them in school. We want them to maintain regular attendance. We want to have them eventually achieve a diploma or HSE. And of course, even beyond that, we have a transition component, which I'll talk about briefly later on, that allows them to stay with our program for a period of time after graduation to assist them with their career and or their college plans. So whatever that might be, we're going to be there to help them through that process. All right. And I mentioned DHS, PDE, and the center. We all have roles that we serve specifically regarding our programs. So PDE is our policies, procedures, grant compliance, fiscal and budget concerns, and overall programming. That would be our guidelines and our grants that go out, you know, every so often for either reallocation, or we look for new grantees, which this will be our first year doing that. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a little while as well. DHS provides all oversight when it comes to funding and eligibility, and we have the data system that they use, which is the Commonwealth Workforce Development System, or CWDS. Most of our programs really hear that and get, you know, it's like CWDS is kind of one of those things that is a kind of that thorn in the side of all of our programs, but it is something we have to do from a programming standpoint related to funding. And so we want to make sure that we're following all of those guidelines and that our students are getting served as best they can within those guidelines. The center, which this is my role, so I am training technical assistants, professional development, data collection and analysis. I assist with annual programming monitoring or annual program monitoring. My role used to be much more involved in that process, but since probably about 2019, they put me back kind of more in a technical assistance and support role so that I'm able to be that liaison between the grants, the grantees and the PD and DHS. So it's really been a nice transition out of the monitoring process into me being more of a support for that, both proactive and reactive, right? So whatever happens with the monitoring, I'm there to help our programs keep on the right track. I also obviously do a lot of research and look into things that I can provide my programs, which would be things like information and resources related to teen parenting, but also reproductive health. Lots of other topics that I'm going to go into as we move forward. Before we go on, please feel free. I just want to make sure you know if you have any questions as we go to keep that in mind if you want to ask at that moment, or if you want to hold on to it, that's fine. On the slide right now, you have the list of our current ELECT programs. And this, you know, if you don't know exactly where everything is and on the map and who's where and all that, hopefully this slide will be able to help you with that so that you can take a look at that, see where the current grantees are. But I did want to mention we do have this request for application going out in the spring, which it should be technically probably should have been out already, but it's being approved and going through the process before it does. Our next one will be a competitive grant that's coming out this spring. It'll be for 5 years, and we're actually hopeful that we'll get some new grantees to serve some of the areas in the state that do not currently have coverage. So keeping that in mind and looking at our list of sites, I can also provide for you a little later. I can provide for you I can switch my screen and show you all the counties in PA and what programs actually cover those counties, as well as point out the counties that do not have current ELECT coverage. So I can share that with you momentarily. Here in the chat. Oh my God, sorry, Brandy, I was looking at your message. Okay, I'm glad you're back. All right, so let's go to the next slide here. This has to do with our eligibility. We talked already about the idea that we have an age out You know, that happens. It used to be 22, now it's 25, and that means we can serve them up until they turn 25. To be eligible, the prospective participant must also be expecting and parenting, and that includes both our females and our males, our young moms, our young dads. They can be eligible. Like a dad can be in the program with the moms graduated, like this, you know, doesn't have to be both of them. It can be one or the other. And it doesn't matter if they have primary or even any kind of official or formal custody. They can be a part of the program as a non-custodial parent. That comes into play a lot of times with students who may be in foster care or maybe they're younger. And we have to make sure that we are able to provide the services that they need in order to do that, no matter what circumstances they're under. So the next eligibility requirement is that they're attending or in the process of enrolling in within 30 days of enrollment in the program. They need to be enrolled in an educational entity that's approved by PDE. We have HSE programs, alternative educations, you know, is another thing that we look at in terms of what's approved. So if for some reason you have a school or a cyber charter, alternative education site, any of those things, typically what we do is we have to confirm that those are covered or approved by PDE as an entity to be able to not only provide the education leading to that, but also to provide the diploma or the HSE. So if they have that, we can serve them. So in addition to being enrolled in a PDE approved entity, they also must be expectant or custodial young parents of all genders who are receiving TANF benefits. That's one kind of pathway, right? So if they're receiving TANF or their family is, we have that kind of route or track in our program. And then we have another one for those who do not receive TANF, but they're not above the federal poverty income guidelines. So that's kind of our catch-all, right? Because that'll put any student who's expectant or parenting into our programming because they're not going to be making more than the FPIG. So I think it's really important that we look at that because we're definitely able to serve students of all backgrounds coming up through whether it's TANF or not. One thing that isn't listed here, and as in hindsight, I should have probably put it here, is that we also require that our students, and I just lost my thought. Michelle, do you know where I was going with that? Maybe not. Take
For
a guess.
eligibility purposes?
Yeah, I was thinking of a third one and I don't know why I didn't put it here and now I just lost it. See, it's an age thing, like something to look forward to where your brain just goes poof.
You had TANF, Family Works.
I think the statement I was going to make has something to do with whether or not they are custodial, non-custodial. They can also be, we used to have to verify paternity. So that's one of the things I will say that is no longer something we have to do. We don't have to confirm or require them to show paternity, which is very helpful to a lot of our programs because it's too soon in their life before they turn 18 to have them establish paternity and have all those legal possibilities that could come up. Some do, some do not have that paternity established. We cannot serve students or young people who are actually like in a lockdown facility of any kind, right? So we can serve like students who might be at a particular, I want to say maybe residential homes and things, as long as they're not under lockdown, right? Like that they can't leave the facility. If they're in a facility that they cannot leave for whatever reason and for however long, we cannot provide elect services. Has a lot to do with our funding. The link here actually that takes us to the institutional eligibility FAQ will go over some of those things. I know what it was. We cannot serve, so they must also have a social security number and or an A number assigned to them in order to be eligible for the program. So there's a lot of question about, especially in some of our more urban, like with Philly, for example, they come to us all the time saying, can we serve these students? And really the key there is that they must have a social security number. Recently, we're able to do the A number for refugees that are coming in who are working through that process of becoming documented. But right now, if you just talk about any general undocumented young person, we can't serve them unless they can provide a social or an A number. And that is completely due to our funding. So it's a TANF rule and guideline that we cannot change. Some of our programs, though, and I will be transparent about this, a lot of our programs will either apply for other grants, or they'll look for additional funding, or some sort of way for them to continue to be able to serve the undocumented students, right, alongside, like in a parallel with our ELECT programs, because we can't use ELECT funds to serve them, but we can use other funds if programs are actively searching that money out, right? So they try not to turn kids away unless they absolutely have to. And that's really the hard part about our programming with our funding the way it is. Any questions about those eligibility components? Okay. One of the other critical pieces of our programming is Elect Fatherhood. We want to make sure that we aren't, I think we can all agree that typically young fathers, at least, or really young males in general, are hard to engage, right, in any kind of programming like this. And so when a young man finds out he's going to be a father, we try really hard to grab them and pull them in as soon as possible, because the earlier in the pregnancy they're involved, outcomes and statistics will tell you that that is really good for the baby. It's good for the couple. And whether or not they're coupled, we work with them on co-parenting skills. We work with them on how to handle and show their feelings, like how to connect and bond with their baby, like all of the information that they would need to know and experience, and support them through that process. So our goal is to get young fathers enrolled and then keep them engaged in the programming to really help improve their outcomes moving forward. So our young dads are kind of near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I wish we could do even better. I think our programs always work to make it better for our young males, but I think it's just it can be a challenge. So this is a big piece of our ELECT puzzle that we are always trying to solve, right? We want to make sure we get them in, engage them with father-friendly environments, father-friendly language and marketing materials, and any of that stuff, because that's really a key part of our program. Okay. So we do kind of all of this stuff, and usually it's kind of all intertwined and mixed together, and we're doing all of these things each year for our students. But our case managers, just to give you some idea of our program structure, which could have been a slide as well, is that we have each grant, when the grant is awarded, it's awarded to, or at least historically, it's been awarded to a district or an intermediate unit. And so when that happens, those those grants are then organized in terms of program structure. We expect there to be a program coordinator, which is what Michelle's role is. And then under that program coordinator, we expect to have case managers and at least a data specialist and a backup data person. Most of our programs are not large enough that they can maybe do each of those roles individually. So for example, we might have a program coordinator that is a program coordinator, but also as a caseload, or maybe our coordinator is also a data person, right? So we have to have a lot of our roles doubled up based on whatever the program capacity is to serve. In some programs that are larger, they may have even more and additional roles that they have filled. I know our program in Philadelphia, for example, which is essentially 4 programs in one, because they have 4 contractors that run the program. They are a little more intense when it comes to their structure, because we have a compliance person and somebody to look at their files and somebody. So larger programs may require additional staff and roles that they might create just to make sure their program is actively functioning well and efficiently. But what we do with the programs we have is our case managers will meet with our students one-on-one. They also provide group sessions in which they can be the presenter, or they might have outside agencies or other community partners come in and provide that education. An example of that would be, for example, something on reproductive health and birth control and the things that they might need to know for STI prevention. We might have a contractor come in to do some of those things that is more, in tune, and that's what they do all the time. Like expertise is a big part of that. But we also have group education sessions where we meet with them and talk about how to do goal setting, or how to maybe creating vision boards and all these, so there's all kinds of different things that our group education can really do. And the presenters can be either our ELECT staff or they can be outside agencies. The others are kind of just like general, but we are definitely providing individualized and group instruction and support. Our programming is meant to be creative and flexible. So what that means is we may have programs that need something a little different, right, than the other program next to them, or they might need to do something different with their kids that other programs don't need to do. It just really depends on the circumstances, and we're there for it. We do respond individually to programs and give them whatever insight and input they need. We do offer summer programming. We're a year-round program service and support for our students. So our expectations from the state perspective is that they are doing group sessions throughout the summer to kind of get their kids involved and bring them all together into like a little community, provide peer support, that kind of stuff. But this is their way of being, and summer is a great way to be creative, right? In terms of what you do. Maybe you go on site, some sort of site tour or visits. They go to colleges and look at those things. We've had daycare tours. We've had, you name it. And they've also taken the young parents and their children or their families, extended families, to places like a park to have a picnic, and they do some educational piece while they're there. It can really be like, it's a catch-all, right? It's like everything you can think of is in some ways relevant. You can make it relevant to our students. And then, of course, the transition component, which I talked to you about briefly. There are some stipulations with that. So all of our kids are eligible for transition once they graduate. They are given either 60 days or 90 days or 120. And so I'm going to explain that. 60-day transition is for our TANF eligible participants who are receiving TANF, and what the reasoning for that is they get 60 days, and then they are having to go into the Department of Human Services work, maybe the EARN, Work Ready, some of their programming instead of staying in ELECT. And that's, designed intentionally. The second eligibility category, which I mentioned before, they may not be receiving TANF, but they aren't over that 235 FPIG. So when that happens, those students can stay in for 90 days, or if they've decided to go to school, they can stay, or they are working actively, they can stay in for 120. I think it is either or, but if either way, they can stay in for a longer period if they're pursuing some kind of post-secondary education. So, all right, let me know if you have questions. I just wanted to share before we get into our actual outcomes, one of the things we do look at is our program enrollment. And I will tell you that it probably won't shock people to know the numbers are down. But I know for a long time when I first started, our number was well over 3,000 each year. But this year, 23-24, we served just over 2,000 students. But I feel like we have a couple of different options for why that might be the case, right? So the first one, obviously, we could be positive in our cup half full kind of thing and say this is because teen pregnancy rates are going down, or they're not, or they're staying steady, or whatever. But I tend to be, I'm usually a very positive half full kind of person. But I think in this case, what we're dealing with is kids that are not being identified or found. I won't say that the rates aren't down, but I believe that in our case, those counties with no service, those areas where we might not be quite serving a certain district because of capacity or ability to serve. And then our kids that leave brick and mortar schools and go to cyber schools once they find out they're pregnant. So we're always looking for creative ways and outreach to reach the kids that maybe have dropped out, have switched to a cyber, have whatever the case may be. We want to try to find them. And a lot of our programs, and I might let Michelle speak to this for a second, actually, because when we talk about outreach and bringing kids into the program that need our services, there's some creative things that they do to do that. Can you talk for a second, Michelle, about some of the marketing or some of the things that you do to reach out to the communities?
Yeah. So I think a big piece of the recruitment for ELECT is really developing relationships with the school districts, but also not excluding those, cyber charter schools. So I know here in Lancaster and Lebanon counties, we work closely with one called Agora Cyber Charter. We're very close with the social workers and school guidance counselors there. And then also another one is called Insight PA Cyber Charter. So we work very closely. We have a lot of students who are within those entities, but also keeping really good rapport with more of the brick and mortar schools as well. So that for us can be frequent check-ins going into the school districts. Keeping up-to-date contact information. I mean, we know things change. There's turnover, contact information changes. So periodically I'll kind of reach out to all the districts and be like, we're here, this is our contact information, distribute this out to your guidance department, to your school social workers, and keep a good rapport and relationship that way. Our case managers meet with students in the school district, at their home. So if they're in a district, they'll pop in to the guidance department, they'll drop off brochures. We're constantly keeping that line of communication open. And that also holds true for our community partners as well. Here within Lancaster and Lebanon counties, we work with a program called Nurse Family Partnership. We got referrals from them. That's a really great partnership. Also, Early Head Start is a big one too. So there's a lot of room for collaboration. And I think the biggest thing with recruitment too is just keeping those lines of communication open, knowing who to contact is huge. So that's a lot of what we do here within Lancaster and Lebanon counties.
Thanks, Michelle. So you definitely hit on a couple of key areas that I wanted to, that you made me think that I want to highlight. And so I do appreciate all of our programs for the amount of work that they do, and legwork. They go out and they go into doctor's offices and WIC offices, and they go to Head Start, Nurse Family Partnership. And one of the key areas where our programs get referrals from too is from our county assistance offices. That's where that TANF funding comes in. So they can kind of be our liaison with the CAOs. So we communicate with DHS, our DHS people for ELECT, and we have them help us out with the CAOs if we need to, but we get referrals from there as well. Relationships are key, and Michelle was absolutely on point. One of the things I've been trying to work really hard over the past 10 years really to improve is our relationship, or building a relationship and then maintaining a relationship with our cyber charters. The more cyber schools know about us and the more we know about them, the better our partnership can be, and we can try not to lose those students once they get into virtual school, because it's really tough to keep them engaged and to serve them when they're in that situation. But we serve quite a few cyber kids, actually. That's probably a big piece of our program.
Yeah, and if not cyber charter, we also have a good amount who are still enrolled within their home districts, but participating in an online program through the districts. So you want to keep engagement that way. And what's so nice about the ELECT program is a lot of times when students are participating in an online program, a lot of times they go through like an isolation period of, right? And so being able to be in a program where they have opportunities to connect with other people who might be in a similar stage of life is extremely valuable for those students.
Yeah, I think what's really challenging is a lot of kids, you think about isolating stuff, right? So going to cyber school is a decision that, is made by a lot of parents and students, whether they're expecting or parenting or not. But I can say that the added stressors and added isolation that they feel being pregnant or knowing they're about to have a baby, all of those things really compile and make it difficult for our students to be successful if we are not, unless they are enrolled in ELECT. I feel like they've got so much more support. They've got a lot of options in terms of how they track and work out their their attendance and their grades and all that stuff. So our case managers are very much in tune and aligned with the students individually to make sure that their outcomes are good. So thanks, Michelle. So I think I'm going to move into the outcomes a little bit, and maybe on each one of these, I don't know, maybe Michelle, if you want to chime in once I go over it to give us some ideas what you work on as a program to improve or work on these outcomes. So as you can see here, we have 5 major state outcomes. One of them is the enrollment that I mentioned earlier on another slide, but that's one that's very much like we can control, but also it's difficult because we can't say that a program is failing necessarily if their enrollment isn't meeting 75% of what they're funded for example. So we don't put that in with these 5 components as much. So school attendance, GPA, which is academic performance, graduation rates, student retention, and secondary pregnancies. I'm going to break these down, each of them, as we go forward. Talking first about our attendance, our targeted outcome is above in the red. It says 75% or higher of students enrolled in the program will meet 75% of their expected attendance for the school year. So for example, if a school meets 180 days of that year, right? Like that's a standard school district number of days, then we expect the students to be there 75% of that time. That's kind of how we do our calculations. And if they haven't met that 75, we want to look to see if at least their attendance is improving. So we have 2 parts of this outcome that are figured out data-wise. And with that, to give you a an idea what we look at, statewide, our outcome is 79% for 23-24. So if you look, I mean, it's over the expectation of 75% statewide, which is good. But if you look at that, it's kind of another thing like enrollment, right? It's like a trending. We know that attendance, truancy becomes a major issue with a lot of our students because of the circumstances they're in. They really have a hard time getting to school. And so our goal is to help them set their own goals and maybe some expectations on themselves as to this is how many days a week I'm going to make sure I get to school this week. We want to make sure we're not downplaying the importance of that, because even if they're not coming to school, like if they were not coming to school more than 1 day a week, then we say two days a week is a win, right? Like we want to keep working that up and scaffolding that so much that they eventually get to a point where they see the value and they understand why their grades might be lower or they might be struggling. And so I don't know, Michelle, I think just understanding the reason behind the student's absence, like we say here, is a huge part of that, because then you can, as a coordinator and case managers, you can talk with them individually about what they need. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. You need to identify barriers, right, with attendance. We track, so Nicole kind of mentioned this earlier in the presentation, but I'm the coordinator for our ELECT program, but I also am the data specialist as well. So every month I collect attendance from every single district for every single student. So I see like what are the trends. And then that information goes to the case managers and they look at that closely. So sometimes it's just a check-in of like, hey, I noticed these days you missed some school, like what's going on? Can you speak to that? And our case managers, I will brag a little, they work so hard with building such good rapport with the students that they're open to having these conversations, right? Because there are so many different barriers that could be leading to attendance concerns. So we really take the approach too, where we look at like, okay, you missed 5 or say 10. You missed 10 days this month. Oh, but look at this month. You only missed 5, right? That's a win. And we praise that. We incentivize that. We work on goal setting. Like let's look at attendance. You know, you've had some trouble getting to school. What's the barrier? And then what can be our goal? What can be a plan that we can set in place that'll work for you to get to school? So yeah, I think how you said it, you need to understand the reason why first and foremost before you can kind of take that action. And for some students, it can just be, you know, just a lack of the motivation to get there. We are approaching the end of year for some students, and you're seeing trends sometimes of it's starting to slow down too right now at this time of year. But I think that's where our case managers come into play, where they have such a strong rapport and relationship that they can have kind of these tougher conversations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michelle, you know, is right on point with that. I think identifying obstacles is the first step. And then of course we move forward into how can we change that? It's really important that we give our kids a voice in this though, because we could easily like guess, like based on what they're telling us, what's happening. But we definitely put a really strong emphasis on individualized incentives, individualized planning and goals and that kind of thing. So Kiara, am I saying Kiara or Kiara? Which is it? I don't want to. Okay, Kiara. That was kind of my gut, but then I'm like, Kiara. So you're asking about some things that we can that can be implemented to encourage and assist students to get to school. And I can tell you that, gosh, for us, it's like we tell our programs like the sky's the limit. Can you do this? Can you do that? But again, it has to do with funding and budgets too. So we do incentivize students. Each program, though, I will say this, all of our 25 programs operate autonomously. So they may not all do the same thing, and they may not all have to do the same thing based on where they're located. And like you said, on regions or whatever. The guidelines come down from PDE. And as long as they're meeting those guidelines, how they do it and what they're doing, as long as they're within budget and all of that, is really fair game. So we really want them to do whatever works best for them, specifically whatever works best for their individual students. So if you sit down with a student and you say, okay, what is it that's going to motivate you? Or maybe after meeting with that student for so long, you can say, I think this is what will motivate them, right? So it just depends on the circumstances. And we have the full gamut of individuals in this program. We have some that are not talkers at all and probably won't communicate or engage very well. We have some that could probably walk in and run our elect programs. It just very much depends on the circumstances. But again, I just think the individualized incentives that we do with our programs. So what about, Michelle, if you want to just share briefly on what kind of incentives you offer to students, because keep in mind, that's not just with attendance though. So incentives can be used for anything.
Yeah.
But for attendance, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It can be tied to like you accomplished a goal. We tie it to so many different things. But we do within our program, we do a lot of gift cards incentives. So we do hey, your attendance you improved this month, or you were here X amount of days. Here's a $25 gift card to Walmart. That's something that students, they respond really well to it. And it kind of keeps them motivated. A lot of times we'll give gift cards to Target, Walmart, or Sheetz. Sheetz is primarily students who need gas. And then Target, Walmart, they can also buy items for their kiddos there as well. So that is a big motivator for some of our young parents. We also are fortunate, sometimes we can provide supplies, if they need something, but we like to tie it, unless it's a safety concern, that's a little different, but we like to tie it to, well, you're getting this because look at your attendance. Like, it was great. You were here, you were participating. And we do that with our group sessions as well, to encourage engagement. But then also we're able to offer different events to our students. That's a motivator sometimes. And I'm going to be honest, sometimes our students are motivated to come to school because they know they get to meet with their case manager. And that is extremely special when that connection gets so strong that it's like you are coming to school because you have your person, right? You have that one person who you can connect with, who you have this relationship with, and they're excited. They're excited to come and meet with their case manager. So it's really special when that kind of organic connection happens and that becomes the motivator. But yes, we do incentivize a lot. I mean, we'll text students and be like, hey, I saw you were there all day this week. That's great. And even problem solve, like, is there something that was different this week that your attendance improved? And just really, really giving them that praise for it.
Yeah, we do talk about both tangible and intangible incentives, because I think that it really is so dependent upon what that student or that young person responds to, right? So if a student is really into something, like in particular, maybe they're very artsy and creative, and you could do something with an incentive where you give them, some supplies to draw, or like it could be. So we want to make sure that our students aren't feeling like the incentives are like blanket, like generalized incentives. They don't respond as well to that. So if every student's getting this for this, they're like, like I want to. So celebrating them individually, letting them know, hey, we know what you like, we know what you're into, so we're going to do this. The more that rapport is built up and those relationships are built up, the better our incentives work. And just having the case manager is an incentive in some ways for some students. It just depends on the circumstances.
Definitely find what motivates them.
Yeah.
Find their passion, find what motivates them, and work from there.
But I'm just curious, for the sake of maybe just some other voices in the room, I'm wondering if you could, maybe Kiara or Siobhan, if you have ideas, what might be some of those key obstacles to students' attendance for our kiddos? What do you think? Putting you on the spot. It's a quiz.
I actually used to work same position. I'm a family services specialist, but with early Head Start. So
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with the ELECT program. I didn't understand all the things that you're sharing about the program. So it is pretty cool to get a better understanding of how you guys operate.
Yeah.
And the, targets that you guys are trying to meet with the student and all of those things. But I have worked closely with some of the kids caseworkers at the building, because obviously we have a few classrooms in our high school sites. So, we're enrolling children in the classrooms, which a lot of our parents would be from the ELECT program. And I would say that was one of the best ways to try to help encourage and motivate them to school, because, you can come to school and your baby can come, and your child is here for the entire duration of the day that you're here. So trying to eliminate that as an obstacle. But one of the sites in particular that I was at, transportation was a big issue. So although they did receive like Connect cards, so if they needed a Connect card, we provided a Connect card as well. But that site in particular is just kind of like off in a very weird area. There was no like sidewalk, so it just was like hazardous. So we did implement like a baby van, like a baby bus that had car seats on it, and it would go up to the junction and pick the kids up. But what I used to hear a lot is just that it's hard. High school starts early. And when you have a young child who is not sleeping through the night, and you're trying to be a student and do homework and wake up that early and get to school, and you may not have support, so there isn't anybody to watch your child, and you solely only have maybe like the classroom at school, but it's hard for them to get out the bed, especially when it's cold. They're kind of just like, listen, I can't do it.
Oh my goodness. Kiara, you could do this presentation. So I
you
do, I'm
could.
just kidding. So I want to say though that, I mean, you're absolutely right. So, I mean, think about it. I struggle, like I struggle just to get to work on time. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can't even imagine the stuff that these kids are juggling to try to get somewhere where they're supposed to be, like by law, right? So this isn't just like, oh, they might get a slap on the wrist if they don't go to school every day, but this is a huge factor, not only in, I mean, what we need to try to do, I think, is really shift that the narrative from like you're not doing what you need to do to get to school to how can the school help be supportive of you. And that's something that I'm a huge advocate for, and that our case managers realistically are advocates for our kids, because they'll say like, hey, let's not put one of her core classes at 8 a.m. in the morning or whatever. Let's put that one in the afternoon. So if she has to miss school, or I say she, but he too, whatever. The point is so that they don't have to miss that important stuff in the mornings. Or if they tend to have a lot of appointments in the afternoon, or they go to work after school, so they leave early, really just based on each student's needs, we need to advocate. We need to be their advocate within the schools to say, hey, listen, you're not doing what you need to do to support our young parents, whether it be having a place where they can go for, like a lactation room for them to go and actually pump, or to do the things they need to do. And so we are their advocate in so many ways. Like even when it comes to Title IX, like we have to be aware of what their rights and responsibilities from the school are too. So what do they need to be doing to make our kids more comfortable and to help improve their outcomes? we can't do it alone, right? So we have to engage with the schools, the community partners. We have to engage with not just, we have to engage with essentially every facet of the school. Like we need to talk with their counselors, their nurses, their administrators, their teachers, like anything we can do to get that in with them is better for our kids. That's just how we see it. So I think transportation is huge. And
Yeah.
if you just link that together, it's the same with, which we're going to get into childcare momentarily, but that's a huge factor that is somewhat related to transportation, or it could be a completely different issue. It just depends on where they're at. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think we have such a variety and diversity in our programs. Like we have one or two that might be completely rural and have 6 counties and have to travel here and there between, or kids have an hour drive to school on a bus. And, there's all kinds of stuff rurally. But then if you get to the urban areas, there's different, maybe not more or less, but different struggles, right? So I think it's important to note that too. Not just our rural kids have trouble with transportation, which
Yeah,
you would think, yeah.
I love that you mentioned that because you're absolutely right. Transportation countrywide is a major barrier. And I think people are still problem solving. How do we address this? Because it is so major. One thing I want to point out real quick, you mentioned that partnership between EHS and Elect, and that is beautiful. Like when you can
Yes.
have those strong partnerships, it's beautiful. As Nicole mentioned too, we become that liaison a lot of times between the student and the school. And one of the things I will mention, just kind of circling back to that transportation piece, is we do with our students like a participant like demographic form within the first 30 days of their enrollment. And one of the questions we ask on that is, what is their mode of transportation? Like we try to find that out very early on with working with the student. Is it, do you drive? Do you kind of rely on transportation from a family member? Do you primarily take a bus? Do you walk? Like, so we're having those conversations very early on to try to find out the reasoning for if there are barriers, and if so, what potentially could be causing them.
Right, absolutely. And so I talked about, we got ahead of well, not really ahead of ourselves, ahead of the slides. So I wanted to just switch to this one and indicate to you that we are we're very aware of the key issues, but we also want to always be asking what individual problems they're having or obstacles or struggles or whatever, whether it be for school attendance, their grades, whether they can, a lot of our kids don't have a quiet place to even study, or maybe they don't have their own home. Maybe they're couch surfing, right? Like we've got a lot of very individual situations that need attention, and we can't just give some blanket solution because it's not going to work for everybody. So I think what's really important is that time we spend with them, and that first 30 to 90 days really, to help identify these obstacles, help get to know and build that rapport. Because the sooner you build the rapport with the student and they trust you, the more you're going to get from them and the more help you can provide. So it's really helpful. We talk about things like mental health. We talk about things like, expressing yourself differently, or, just lots of different ways that we can help our students. But in this case, like we do monitor their attendance. We look at their excused versus unexcused. We look at all the barriers. And of course, I think it probably isn't shocking that a lot of our students try very hard to have family watch their babies when they go to school, which, as we can all probably guess, is not reliable. Like it's just not a reliable form of childcare in a lot of cases. I'm not saying never, but it tends to be their choice to do family or relative or neighbor, and then find out like, hey, so often each month this person's not available. So then what are you going to do? So we require them to have a childcare plan and a backup plan, which I'm going to show you in a second here what the form looks like. It's kind of a lot of things we're asking, but we do this so that they can be thinking about their childcare. Whoops, I took it. Where did I put it? Okay, hold on. There's a slide in here that has our childcare plan, and I will get to that. But the point that we're trying to make here is that no matter what the circumstances are, we want all students to have a plan and a backup plan, right? And we do that even with our expecting students. Like if they aren't yet parents, they still are parents, but they don't have the physical baby in their care right now. We want them to create the plan, even as they're expecting, so that they can like revisit it, think about it. This all has to be started right away for them to start thinking about how they're going to have their child cared for while they focus on their education, right? So that's an important piece of it. And I really thought that this slide for childcare was, sorry. Okay, never mind. Going back. So we talk a little bit about our academic performance. I just noticed that Kiara disappeared. Do you think I should wait? Is she come? Okay, I'll keep
No, she
going.
said she had to hop off for a workshop.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the outcome for 75% or higher of students enrolled in the program will attain a program year GPA of at least 2.0. This is on a 4.0 or 100% grade system. We noticed, though, that this is probably what I think a couple years now since we implemented this new outcome, the way it's worded, is that we wanted to make sure, again, just like attendance, that we're giving credit to the students who are improving. So, I mean, I'm saying this is what's so important to note. A 2.0 is a C. It's a C average. That's not, I hate to say it, but that's high, right? And I high for kids that are really struggling or who have grown up in a family that doesn't put a lot of emphasis or importance on education, or maybe now that they're busy with having a baby, they don't see it as important, right? So we want to be looking at this as like you either are above a 2.0 or you're showing an increase from quarter to quarter in your GPA. So improvement is a big piece of this program. We don't want to make assumptions, and we don't want to, devalue any of the work that they're doing toward their improvement. So if they have a 1.3, we want to see that they get a 1.5, right? Just whatever the case may be. For us, academic performance, pretty good last year, was up at an 86% of GPA achievement under this outcome. We know that poor academic performance, or just the grades being low, is one of the most consistent predictors of dropout. So we want to make sure that we're really focused on helping these kids to remove obstacles and help support them in any way we can to keep them in school. That's a huge, I mean, obviously that's our ultimate goal, is their diploma or HSE. So that being said, a few things that we do to monitor performance are listed here, but I will let, I think it's nice to kind of have Michelle comment on each of these sections, because she actually has the program right there at her disposal and she works with the kids. And so Michelle, what about in terms of what we do to help with that? We have a list here, but if you have anything you want to chime in on.
Yeah, I think similar to, so for me, we collect attendance quarterly on like a formal basis. So like every quarter for the student. But also too, that becomes part of our conversation between the case manager and the student. Like they're having, even though I'm like, formally going through 4 times a year, getting the attendance, entering it, the case managers are really having an ongoing conversation of, how are your grades looking like? What classes are you struggling in? What classes do you really enjoy? Advocating is huge, right? If there's a student struggling and we know that there is a barrier in place that is really affecting their outcome in school, we're going to have a conversation with the school guidance counselor. We're going to have a conversation, pulling the teacher, pulling the school social worker. Like it's going to be known that this could be affecting, grades and outcomes. Connecting students too. I think a lot of our students are unaware of what works for them as far as studying, homework, time management. A lot of times, you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes it's just never even been modeled to some of our students of like, maybe you could try this approach just to organize yourself. So the case managers are having those pretty frequent check-ins with them regarding grades, working with them on new, strategies to implement, or just a strategy in general if they never had one. And we also, similar to attendance, we're incentivizing when their grades improve. And that can be, I know, just to speak, we had a student who went through just a lot of life changes, really, really has been struggling academically, And just the slightest increase, right? We're gonna praise. So we do the gift card incentives again. Also going back, what do you enjoy? What motivates you? Let's use that as an incentive for grades.
Yep. Sorry. Like every once in a while, I'm like, I should mute, and then I mute and forgot that I muted. Okay. Yes. So everything that Michelle said is accurate, relevant. We are really focused on connecting our students to the community. And I think one of the missing pieces maybe right now is that I would like to essentially have students be more involved in their communities with some service learning and things like that, which we do not have currently as an expectation of our programs, but I do know of programs that get them out there and volunteering. And, you know, a lot of our kids need certain number of community service hours before they graduate or whatever. So we're always working with them on trying to come up with ways that they can become more comfortable in their own skin, number one, right? Because they're parents, they're young, they might lack some confidence. Maybe they've gone through some things in their lives that keep them from being as productive or successful as they could be. So anything we can do to really improve their overall well-being and their ability to collaborate and connect with community resources. So that's a big part of it. And I found the childcare plan. It is actually in a weird, but not weird place, but place I wasn't expecting. So we do, as part of their grade improvement, but also their attendance, we work on this childcare plan. So I just want to take a second to switch to this childcare plan overview. So within 30 days, we are asking that students complete a childcare plan. Now, this is whether they're expecting or they're currently parenting. We have kids come in and enroll as already parents, and we have some come in that are literally just yesterday found out they're expecting. So there's a wide range of students in different areas and different parts of their, you know, experience as a parent. So we talk with them personally. We ask students to consider and think about what their plans will be for childcare. The plan is required to be student written, signed, and dated by the student and the case manager. This is an expectation from PDE. And we ask that their plan is appropriate. So I think this is really a key point, because a lot of our students will say, well, I don't need childcare because I'm in cyber school. And we're like, but do you though? Because you're not going to, like, you have to be able to focus. So we require them to have a childcare plan and something in place, even if they're cyber students, even if they're just going for their HSE, they need to have time chiseled out for themselves to focus on their academics. And so we ask that they are doing this. And we do serve homebound students as well, like the homebound instruction piece through the district, just so you know that I saw it pop up here. And I'm like, I didn't mention that. And then each year we have them review the childcare plan, unless something changes in the meantime, and then they would update it, right? But they are always having to look at this to see if what changed, what can we do differently, what more childcare can you know, what other form of childcare can you use? Okay, so that being said, the childcare plan looks like this. And so we have a couple of different versions of this over the years. We've used different ones, but this one, I think at this point, is at least as detailed as possible. So that's what we're trying to get to. So they talk about, you know, they acknowledge their responsibility. If they're expecting, they have to fill this out as if they're expecting. And then obviously if they're parenting, but then they can change that information at any time. So just because they do this doesn't mean we're going to like expect them to keep this plan forever. This is just, what do you think? Work it out. It's almost like a worksheet. And then we ask them to continuously update it as things change. Okay. And these are the things we talked about already, I think, just because we did talk about researching and contacting, even arranging tours of daycare centers, completion of the child care form, ongoing case management to talk through some of these things. Our program staff specifically does assist the students with their ELRC applications for childcare funding and locations. But overall, it's just a matter of providing support. Okay, so on to graduation rate. This is obviously, in my mind, since it's our primary goal to get kids to graduate, this outcome kind of like when I see it, it's like has like neon lights blinking. But all of those other things contribute to this. So I think it's really important that we look at graduation rate from the perspective of that we have all of these other things in place. If the other outcomes are high, then this should kind of go along with that, right? I do want to clarify one thing. So in the past, we've only looked at, so at the beginning of a program year, we determine what students are eligible to graduate. We used to do that based on them being a senior, which after some time, I had to say, okay, this doesn't make sense because we could have 50 seniors who at the beginning of the school year, maybe only half of those are technically eligible to graduate based on credits. So we switched to a credit-based, basically credit-based way of looking at their eligibility. So when I say the statewide outcome is 78%, what happens is that we also add in the graduations of our HSE kids who might have been on IEP goals, whatever the case may be. And that one, if you look at the graduation rate, is, it brings us well above 100% of our students. Now, I say that secondary because we are obviously looking at the general, like the key number statewide. But because of the credit scenario, we might have to go sometimes with IEPs on goals, HSE on what they're finishing, and then eventually take the test. So there's a lot of different things that play into this. All right. And then graduation, I think some of these factors are probably things that Michelle's familiar with, and obviously she may even be able to add some more to this. But I think just the idea that the relationship is the key factor is just, we have to use that as our foundation. Everything else is things like study habits, like Michelle was mentioning earlier, setting goals, how to adapt. Really, we're trying to help students advocate for themselves. We're their advocate, but we can't always be their advocate. So we want to make sure that they are learning how to advocate for themselves through modeling or just experience and practice. Anything else that stands out to you, Michelle, from maybe that's not on the slide regarding how we support them to get to their actual graduation?
I think you covered a lot of this. I know one thing that we have taken an increased focus on here at IU 13 is self-sufficiency, right? Like ultimately, we are preparing students to be without our services. So we want them to know how to navigate what potentially comes next. A lot of that is done through modeling. We notice a lot of students, I think they're just very unsure at this age, right? So I'm not only responsible for advocating for me now, but also on behalf of my child. And that can be extremely overwhelming for anyone, no matter what age you are. So a lot of it is, I've done with students, and I know our case managers have something as simple that we might perceive as simple. Talking on the phone can be very anxiety inducing for our students. So just modeling, this is some of the language you can use. This is how you can present yourself. This is what you can say, are such valuable skills to prepare them for a world without us in it. So that's kind of an increased focus we have taken, is a lot of the self-sufficiency skills. And honestly, a lot of, everything that is on this list contributes to that ultimate goal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think what you just mentioned is really telling in terms of the advocacy aspect of that. I think it's not just important that we teach our kids to advocate for themselves, but the reason and the importance of that then is that they will then be the advocate for their own child, which is what Michelle mentioned. I think it's, that's just another layer of importance when it comes to advocating for themselves. And you're right. You would be, maybe you wouldn't be shocked, but I think that it is shocking sometimes to see how students just quickly catch on to things when they're being shown kind of by example how to do them. So maybe Michelle has a student that doesn't want to make these phone calls, needs to set up appointments, but doesn't really feel comfortable. Maybe Michelle sits in the room with that student. Maybe Michelle makes the first call and shows it as an example, and then keeps building the confidence of that young person to be able to do it themselves. So there's a lot of things that we can do as case managers out there in the field with these kids to show them the value that they hold and show them the the, their talents and their skills, and to build that confidence and resilience that maybe they were lacking prior to this. So that being said, let's move on to student retention. This one is a little weird for me. I've always kind of struggled with how to figure this out, right? Because it actually encompasses a couple of different things. So we do ask that our programs focus on this goal, which is 75% or higher of their participants will that enroll anytime throughout the program year will remain active. And in this case, throughout the end of that program year, because that's how we do outcomes. But basically, our goal is once they're in, we want them to stay in until they get to that ultimate goal of graduation. So that's a big one. Right now, we're at 78% of enrollment, retention rate. But I think that what's important to note about this is that we're talking about not just referrals and bringing new students in and keeping them there, but also retrieving students who have left the program. So we have students who might have left the program, or students who may have dropped out of school without being in our program, but now need to get back into an entity to get their diploma. So we can be of assistance in all of those areas. And I think it's really important to note that. We do want to make sure we also point out that when we look at this retention rate, we have some that are kind of, what do you say, like a little, little slap on the wrist to programs to say this isn't a good rate. But we do not include the data for students who leave the program beyond ELECT program's control. So if a student moves to another state, or they have a miscarriage, or an abortion, or whatever the case may be, in some cases we have some health issues when the baby's born, right? So there's lots of different things we have to look at. If a student leaves due to any extreme circumstances that are out of the ELECT program's control, we do not count that against the programs when it comes to this outcome. In terms of retention, I'm going to go to this slide, but ask Michelle again, maybe if there's anything else that she can think of. I think the key here is just really holding our students accountable. But in order to do that, we need to show them the value of it. Because as you know, if you don't have buy-in, you're not going to get very far. They need to know the value of this program in their lives and what it can do to help them moving forward. If they don't buy into that, if they're not, if the relationship isn't being built between them and their case manager, there's a number of reasons that students might leave, right? Or might not continue. We actually have to exit students after a certain amount of time without any contact, for example, or if they're not performing whatever responsibilities they have to ensure that the program can keep them eligible, right? The minute they're out of eligibility, we have to exit them. And so we're really careful about working with students and giving them all full disclosure, transparency. You have to do this to stay in the program. Typically, that's enough to motivate them, but sometimes it's not. So it's unfortunate when we have to exit a student, but what I always tell my case managers is you don't have to cut off communication. You have to try to work them back to the point where they are eligible again, right? So whatever that situation was, if they didn't do their paperwork, if they had some kind of issue, they need to be more attentive and more engaged in the program for us to be able to work with them. And looking at some of those other things, I'm just going to go to Michelle for this one to kind of highlight anything else.
I think exactly what you said. There has to be buy-in. We need to know the why to stay motivated for things. And the same holds true with this program. We try to be very clear up front. These are the expectations of this program. But I think another really important thing to note is timing. Sometimes you have to acknowledge that the timing might not be right for a specific student, but that doesn't mean that it will never be the right time for them. So I think and it is hard. You never want to exit students, but sometimes it does. You do have to accept that.
Sometimes that can be the motivator.
Sometimes that can be, yeah. Sometimes too, we've had to have really hard conversations with students of this truly is the expectation of the program, and if you can't meet that right now, we understand, but this is the steps we need to take. Sometimes that lights a fire and it's like, oh no, I don't, and other times it's like, well, then so be it.
See you later.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that's where the piece is so huge of what are then the ways to stay in contact with those students so we can pull them back when maybe it's a better time for them. I know in the past, our ELECT program has sent out postcards to every single student who exited for some other reason than graduation or something outside of, moving. So postcards, just kind of staying in contact. Like sometimes it could be a couple months down the road and be like, hey, I just wanted to check in, see how everything's going. And that might be a way to kind of bring them back. But a theme I really want to highlight are students, they have to want this program, right?
Yeah.
They have to want it. They have to be motivated to participate. Unfortunately, we cannot do that for them. So timing, I think, is a huge factor in regards to retention.
So I think it's really important that you said timing. I don't have this on the slide, but I think it really is important to note that just because a student, so let's say if a student gets into the program, they realize the expectations are maybe higher than what they can do at the moment. We want to give them that opportunity and the space to really make their own decisions about that. But I think what ultimately ends up happening is students who, number one, have been enrolled and leave, if they've been exited for whatever reason, they probably struggle enough that they'd be like, okay, ELECT has really been a value to me, so I want to go back. Or if they don't enroll in the program, but they have peers who have and have shared how helpful it is, then eventually they come back. So writing students off isn't what we do. One of the things we do more than anything is just maintain, and we encourage our programs to maintain that contact, because you never know at any given point when a student's circumstances are going to change. And that's the same with like the undocumented kids, because we say like some of them aren't even really undocumented. They just don't know where to find their social, right? So we actually have the ability to assist them on some of those bigger asks, like, hey, I don't have a copy of my social security card. I have no idea what the number is, blah, blah, blah. So we might help them with that. We've helped kids get copies of their birth certificates. We've helped kids, when it comes to trying to navigate systems and navigate agencies and where they can go and for what. So I think just that support all around is something that kids do eventually realize how important it is to them.
Yeah. I think it's sometimes with anyone, no matter your age, you don't always see the value in something when you're in it. As case managers or anyone in the helping profession, sometimes you don't see your impact until a year later. And
let's face it, the seasons, right? The
Yeah.
seasons of our lives, right? So I can tell you right now, like even for me to go to the grocery store right now is a huge ask, and I would be exited from any program that required that. But I think it's really important to note that our kids are we're all human, and they're going to be going through these ups and downs, and we should be there along that journey with them to be able to kind of say, hey, I'm here whenever you need me. And I think that that's something, if you prove that over and over again, these students are going to be so much more likely to be engaged and be successful. So I think that that's a huge piece of it. Moving into secondary pregnancies, Michelle, did you have anything else on that before we move forward?
Nope.
Okay.
You're good.
So this is a huge one for our program, right? Because statistics will tell you that once a young person is pregnant, expecting, and or is parenting, chances are that they're going to have a secondary pregnancy not long after, because whatever, there's so many different reasons. Some of them, it might just not be knowledgeable about birth control and how it works and when to have it right after delivery. A lot of people are like, oh, I can't get pregnant because I just had a baby. No, that's not true, right? So we want to be very much providing education that is relevant and effective to our students to let them see what they need to be doing to prevent any additional pregnancies while they're in ELECT. So for example, the ELECT program is like, we're looking at our outcomes as a program. So when students leave the program, that data is no longer being collected. So we don't know what happens with those students, whether they have second pregnancies or not. But I do know that when they're in the program, we are at 99% of a statewide outcome for this. So 99% of our participants, 90% 99% of our participants, including those who are legally married, do not, right, in fact, become pregnant or father a second pregnancy while enrolled in the program. And I think what's really valuable about that information is that we can essentially back up the statement that without knowledge, like they have to be educated. about birth control, about the importance of taking care of themselves, their reproductive health, family planning. Like we might say, hey, we have a student who's like, my boyfriend and I were going to get married. We have this baby. We should just go ahead and have another baby. And we're like, how about, right? Family planning would say, let's wait until some of these other things are in a row first. Like I was going to say ducks in a row, but you know what I mean? Because the more that they trust your opinion and your thoughts and how you feel about this, they will be more likely to put it off because they know the value of waiting until they are out of school and they can potentially help, so, be more, more successful, whether it be financially for themselves, have a place to live, maybe they got their license and they can now drive, right? Like, so there's a lot of kids in our programs who end up with a secondary pregnancy before all of their other things are sorted out. And then we end up with more struggle. It's like compounded. So in terms of mitigating secondary pregnancies, we do a lot of work with them to ensure that they do the follow-up visits with their doctors after they give birth. We talk to them all the way through their pregnancy about how to prepare to not have another pregnancy right after they give birth. So contraception and health and how they do things. We help to educate and monitor our students' compliance with the choice of contraception that they've been given or that they choose to use. And of course, education and resources from local partnering agencies. What about anything else, Michelle, that you might do in this case?
No, I think you covered all of this. We pull in a lot of curriculum to have these conversations with students. I think what's most important is they need to know what's available to them, and they have to be educated to make the decision that is best for them. I always say, let's do our research. Research. And we also promote too. Yeah. I love how you tied in the 6-week postpartum appointment. That is huge. That is huge that students go to that. It's huge that they're starting those conversations of what is the right choice for you. So yeah, we tie in a lot of curriculum education. We also partner with certain community agencies, that do a lot of focus on contraceptive use, and sometimes we'll bring in some of those community partners to our group sessions as well for education.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note here too, that there are a lot of our kids' concerns with contraception and doing all these things is cost and insurance and what can they do and what they can't do. But I think having a case manager to really kind of dispel some myths as well about, what can and can't be done, but also give them access to some of these resources that they might not have known about, like some of the clinics that are local or places within their school community that might do some of these things for them. We do have approval as a program to provide condoms to our students. We can also do a lot of different educational like workshops and stuff to help our workshops are no joke. Like you go into a workshop on, reproductive health and contraception and you're seeing all of it. Like it's right there in their face. Like they have to like see it and manipulate and look at it and say, okay, this is what's good for me. But I think that assistance is it's really crucial to their overall outcome. And that's why this is one that we track. Oh my gosh. I just want to mention, that 1222, we were able to get through the whole session and allow time for questions. But I want to give Brandy a chance to ask any questions that you might have and then any kind of follow-up that you'd like us to do or any of that. So you let me know what you think.
Yeah, I so appreciate your time. This is a really thorough explanation. I would love if we could just hit again the details around if somebody was interested in applying to get elected to their program. What are the steps?
So for the grant itself. Okay. So what I will tell you, and this is about the only thing I can right now, is that when the grant comes out, it's going to come out through eGrants this year. This will be the first time ever that we've used eGrants. In the history of our program, we've had the same grantees essentially from I think since about 5 years into the program. And we started in 1990. So we're on our 35th year this year. So it's really exciting. But when the grant comes out, it'll be through eGrants. You will just kind of go through that process of filling in and answering all the questions, providing things like a budget, you know, the narrative piece, all the stuff you would normally do for a grant application. And for us, what the key is going to be for some of these, for somebody wanting to apply, I think it's really crucial that they look at where we serve and where we don't and try to fill those gaps, because that's going to be probably the best option for or really the best chance for a new program to be implemented, right? Wouldn't be so much like it, if it does come up and we have a program in a space that maybe hasn't been doing as well, and this place says we can do this better, then I can't say that we wouldn't make a change, but right now I don't even know what to expect, right? So PDE and DHS do the review of those. They will come back and they'll do like a scoring rubric and, you know, based on what the program proposes that they can do. So for a community agency or a place like, let's say, Head Start wants to apply for the grant and do this, then because you have such a far reach with it, you know, throughout the state, there could be some stipulation there that in various areas that Head Start could run this program. And when that happens, it's essentially the program, like I said, autonomously, but at the same time following guidelines and procedures. It's one of those things where you would then start to, or in your grant application, you would need to identify, right? Like what things you already have in place, what you would plan to put in place, what kind of staffing structure you would want to have, how you would meet the expectations of the program. So when the announcement goes out, and I'm not sure if you're on any of those grant like lists or whatever that you get in your email reminder, hey, we have all these grants. So I'm not entirely sure how that's going to be spread, like the word's going to be spread about it, but I will certainly keep you posted on that to keep you aware of what the, you know, what the expectations are for a turnaround time too, because we don't know when it's coming out. And typically we try to give 6 weeks, but I'm guessing it's going to be less than that for this one because it's getting late in the spring. And the program start date would be July 1. So, and for a 5-year grant. So we're definitely pushing it in terms of time-wise to get it out to people, but that's a PDE thing. So I'm waiting on them. But once it goes out, you should be able to find it in eGrants. And I might even do like a broad, you know, we might even do like a broad email distribution list of people to say, hey, this is open now, or maybe it'll show up on our elect website. I'm not sure how we're going to get it out quite yet, but are there specific questions you have though? Because I can certainly answer anything that, well,
I don't know anything specific. I'm really excited to get this out to our programs. I'm hopeful that programs will be excited to apply for this. I was wondering too, like Michelle, I know that you're with Lancaster Early Head Start and you're kind of connected there. Do you know specific Head Start programs that are strongly connected with Elect? If somebody was looking for an example.
I could find out. I could easily find out. I do know that the majority of our programs probably have at the very least like a contact or they might reach out, but I don't know. There's not a lot of heavy partnership there across the state. I do know some are more, you know, more connected than others with their Head Start. But I can certainly provide you with more detail on that. One of the things that our programs are required to do during their monitoring is present a list of all their community partners and how often they meet and what they're getting from them and whatever the case may be. Because there are times, for example, that a program based on their own funding and budget might contract with somebody to come in and do their education. Sometimes that can be a financial thing where they pay somebody to train, but a lot of times it can be places like Head Start or places like WIC, you know, places that can come in and provide educational information and resources without actually having a cost involved. And that's a great partnership when that happens because our elect programs already struggle enough with money. So yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I want to pause before I end the recording and just see if there were any last statements that you wanted to share.
You know, I'll turn it to this last slide though, because I did forget to do that. My thank you might have been at the end, babe, would have been better. But so this is the overview. I can send you, Brandy, also a copy of the slides that
would be great.
I can just send it in a PDF or something. So if there's people that just want the info, you can share that. But this is just our overall oversight at the state level, who to contact for what kind of thing. And at that beginning, when I said what, what each of them do, that's kind of, this is how you would reach out to whoever you need.
Okay.
And that would be it. I don't know. Michelle, is there anything else you feel like adding?
Not that I can think of right now. Brandy, I
Yeah.
just want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to really share what the ELECT program is. I mean, I personally think it's amazing, an amazing program that our students benefit from and the community benefits from so much that not a lot of people are aware of. So I'm
Yeah.
just I'm grateful that we had this opportunity to kind of give this overview for maybe a community that's not as familiar with what ELECT is and what we do.
Yeah, my pleasure. I think it's such a valuable program. I think too that awareness of the program is probably pretty minimal. So I'm excited that you were both available to do this training today. I'm appreciative of both of your time. I will get this up on our Facebook page, our online training page, and then our weekly feature as well. So you'll be able to check it out and watch yourselves again.
Yeah, Michelle, we're
through those-
famous. Yeah.
Thank
I was
you,
actually
ladies.
just gonna say though, Brandy, I would love to have a copy of this. So if you're
Yep.
posting it, I'll have to look for it. I think this would be beneficial presentation for other, maybe community partners as well. So we'll have to save and hold on to this for future days. But thank you so much
Absolutely.
for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.